The lands between are a graveyard of broken dreams. Everywhere you look, corpses in rusted armor lie scattered across the landscape, their skeletal fingers still reaching towards sights of grace they can no longer perceive. These are the Tarnished who came with fire burning in their hearts, driven by the intoxicating promise of becoming Elden Lord, only to have that flame extinguished by the relentless brutality of a shattered world. For every champion who stands before the Elden Ring, thousands upon thousands have surrendered along the way. Their ambitions have been ground to dust beneath the weight of an impossible task, their hopes crushed by truths too terrible to bear, their minds shattered by grief and madness, and the seductive whisper of the Frenzied Flame. This is not a story of triumph. This is a story of failure. This is an exploration of why the vast majority of Tarnished never complete their journey, why they choose to give up, or are forced to surrender by circumstances beyond their control. From Vyke, the roundtable knight who came closer than any other to claiming the throne, to nameless warriors whose bodies now fertilize the roots of the Erdtree, from Roderika, who never once saw the guidance of grace, to Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, who learned too much and was crushed under the weight of terrible truth. These are the tales of ambition's end, of hope collapsing into despair, of warriors who chose madness over endless futile struggle. The question that hangs in the ashen air of this dying world is simple yet profound. What breaks a Tarnished? What transforms champions blessed by grace into hollow shells wandering aimlessly until something finally grants them the mercy of true death? The answer, as with all things in the lands between, is layered and complex, steeped in tragedy and cosmic cruelty. But before we can understand why so many give up, we must first understand what they were fighting for and what monstrous price the struggle demands of those who dare to pursue it. When the shattering tore the Elden Ring apart and plunged the lands between into an age of endless war, the greater will extended its hand to those who had been cast out long ago. The Tarnished, stripped of grace and banished from these lands by Queen Marika herself, suddenly found golden light returning to their eyes. The dead were given life. The exiled were called home. Grace beckoned them back across the fog, whispering promises of glory, of power, of ascending to become the next Elden Lord. It seemed like a second chance, a divine blessing bestowed upon those who had once been deemed unworthy. The guidance of grace itself appeared as golden rays of light pointing the way forward, showing Tarnished exactly where they needed to go. Sights of grace offered rest and respite, moments of peace in an otherwise hostile world. Most importantly, grace granted the power to level up, to grow stronger with each enemy felled, to convert the very runes of this world into personal might. This was the gift that grace provided, the tools it gave to those it had chosen. But we must consider what grace truly offers beneath the surface of these apparent blessings. Immortality sounds wonderful until you understand its true nature in the lands between. When a Tarnished blessed by grace dies, their soul does not pass on to whatever afterlife might await. It does not find peace or rest. Instead, it snaps back into their body with violent force, compelling them to rise again and face the horror that killed them. Again, and again, and again. A Tarnished cannot escape through death. They cannot rest. They cannot stop. As long as grace burns within them, they are bound to this cursed resurrection, sentenced to an eternity of struggle. Every death is real. The pain is genuine, the terror authentic, the trauma accumulating. But death offers no release, no ending, no mercy. It is merely a reset button that forces you to experience your failures over and over until you either succeed or somehow lose grace itself. The guidance of grace points forward, always forward, toward the Erdtree, toward the throne. But it offers no map, no clear instructions, no warning of what horrors lie ahead. It simply points and expects you to walk into the jaws of demigods, into the lairs of ancient dragons, into places where even the bravest warriors of the shattering dared not tread. The golden light shows you where to go, but never how to survive the journey. It is a finger pointing toward your own grave, beckoning you to die there repeatedly until you either overcome the obstacle or surrender entirely. And what of the promise itself? To become Elden Lord, to mend the Elden Ring, to rule over the lands between. It sounds glorious until you examine what that truly entails. You must hunt down and murder demigods, children of Queen Marika herself, beings touched by divinity and wielding power beyond mortal comprehension. You must claim their great runes, shards of the shattered ring that are fragments of godhood itself. You must survive the treachery of those who would stop you, the madness that permeates every corner of this world, the scarlet rot and frenzied flame and blood magic that stains the earth. You must burn the Erdtree itself, defying the very order you were supposedly called to restore. You must kill gods and their heralds, face beings that have terrorized the lands between for ages. The promise is grand and intoxicating, but the path is designed to be impossible. And grace, for all its golden light and gentle guidance, offers no comfort when you stand broken before an enemy you cannot defeat. It provides no solace when you die for the 100th time to the same relentless assault. It gives no reassurance when you realize that every step forward only reveals new depths of horror and despair. Grace gives you the tools to struggle, but it does not guarantee victory. It does not even promise that victory is truly possible. As we will discover later through Gideon's terrible revelation, the entire purpose may be the struggle itself, eternal and unending, with no victor ever intended. The Tarnished were called back to the lands between with the promise of glory. But many would come to see grace not as a blessing, but as a chain binding them to an eternal task they cannot complete and cannot escape. When that realization sets in, when the weight of impossible odds crushes the flame of ambition, that is when a Tarnished begins to give up. That is when the light in their eyes starts to fade, replaced by something hollow and broken. To understand why so many Tarnished give up, we must first understand what it means to be tarnished, where they came from, and why they were chosen for this impossible task. The history of the Tarnished is one of exile, warfare, and divine manipulation stretching back to the early age of the Erdtree. In those ancient days, Godfrey stood as the first Elden Lord, Queen Marika's consort and champion. He was a warrior of legendary prowess, a conqueror who led brutal campaigns against the giants of the mountaintops, who crushed the Storm Lord, who fought battles that literally carved the shape of the world. Godfrey and his warriors established the dominion of the Golden Order through blood and steel. They were heroes, champions blessed by the Erdtree itself, their eyes burning with the light of grace. But when Godfrey's battles were done, when the last of the great enemies had been vanquished and peace descended upon the lands between, something changed. The light faded from his eyes. Grace, that divine blessing from the Erdtree, was stripped away without warning or explanation. Godfrey became the first Tarnished. No longer graced by the golden light, he was deemed unworthy to remain in the lands he had fought to protect. Queen Marika herself pronounced the exile. Godfrey and his kinfolk, all those who had lost grace, were banished from the lands between. They marched beyond the borders in what would become known as the Long March of the Tarnished, a forced exodus of warriors who had given everything in service to their queen, only to be discarded when they were no longer needed. This established the fundamental nature of what it means to be tarnished. The term speaks to their fallen state, their diminished grace, their loss of divine favor. They had been warriors of renown, blessed champions. Now they were outcasts, marked by their loss. For countless years, the Tarnished lived beyond the fog in distant lands, forgotten by the world they had left behind. They aged and died. Their descendants lived and died in turn, carrying the name Tarnished as both title and curse, a reminder of what their ancestors had lost. Some maintained their warrior traditions, their ambition, their hope that one day they might return. Others simply tried to survive, to build lives in lands that were not their home. But the golden light never returned to their eyes, not until the shattering, when Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring, when the lands between descended into chaos and war, when the demigods began their brutal conflict for the great runes. The greater will made a decision. The Tarnished, long dead or living in exile, would be called back. Grace would be returned to them, fragmentary and uncertain, but present nonetheless. The dead would rise, the exiled would be beckoned home, and they would be given a singular purpose: to stand before the Elden Ring and become Elden Lord. But why the Tarnished? Why call back these exiles rather than empowering those who remained faithful, who never lost grace? The answer lies in the nature of the task itself. The Golden Order had grown stagnant. The demigods had been corrupted by their great runes. The lands between had fallen into an endless stalemate of violence. What was needed was someone willing to do what others would not. Kill demigods, defy the Two Fingers if necessary, tear down the old order and forge something new. The Tarnished, already cast out once, already familiar with hardship and exile, were perfect candidates for such a task. They had nothing to lose. They had been betrayed before, so further betrayal would not break them. They had survived outside the protection of the Erdtree, so they were hardened, adaptable, desperate, and perhaps most importantly, they could be controlled through the very thing they craved most, the return of grace. Give a starving person a taste of bread, and they will do anything for another bite. The Tarnished hungered for grace, for acceptance, for proof that they were worthy. The Greater Will offered them exactly that, dangling the promise just out of reach, keeping them moving forward through an endless cycle of death and resurrection. So the Tarnished returned to the lands between in great numbers. Some came back as corpses reanimated by grace, their souls called back from death itself. Others were living descendants who suddenly felt the golden light ignite in their eyes for the first time. They came with diverse backgrounds, from warriors and knights to scholars and wanderers, but they all shared one common trait. They had been deemed worthy of a second chance by forces beyond their understanding. And that chance came with impossible expectations. Grace gave them a form of immortality, but it was torturous. When a Tarnished blessed by grace dies, their soul remains bound to their body. Through the power of the Golden Order, they resurrect, forced to continue their quest. This is not gentle revival or painless return. Each death is real, the agony and terror genuine. But death offers no escape. A Tarnished cannot choose to give up through dying, because death itself has been stripped from them as long as grace persists. This creates psychological torture unlike any other. Imagine dying to the same enemy over and over, feeling your bones shatter, your flesh torn, your life extinguished, only to wake moments later and face it all again. The frustration, the fear, the slow erosion of confidence and sanity, as you realize you are trapped in this cycle, until you either succeed or somehow lose grace itself. The immortality of the Tarnished is not a gift, it is a sentence. Then there were the Finger Maidens. According to ancient promise, grace would ensure that each Tarnished would be paired with a Finger Maiden, women in service to the Two Fingers, who would serve as guides and companions. These maidens had the sacred duty to turn the runes collected by their Tarnished into strength, to offer counsel and comfort, to stand beside their chosen champion through the darkest moments. But that promise, like so much else in the lands between, proved hollow. Many Tarnished arrived to find no maiden waiting for them. The corpse of a Finger Maiden lies in the Chapel of Anticipation, the very place where many Tarnished first arrive, a grim omen of broken promises. Even those who initially found their maidens faced horrible reality. These women were not companions but sacrifices, fuel for the forge of the giants that must burn to melt the thorns sealing the Erdtree. The path to becoming Elden Lord requires burning your maiden alive. This is what the Tarnished face. Exile returned, immortality that is torture, promises that crumble under scrutiny, and a journey that demands they sacrifice everything, including those few companions they manage to find. They are born to struggle, shaped by exile, forged in betrayal, and sent on a task that may well be impossible. Is it any wonder that so many of them give up? Not all Tarnished are created equal. While some arrive in the lands between with grace burning bright in their eyes, with golden rays pointing the way forward, others find themselves adrift in this hostile world without any divine guidance at all. Their stories reveal something crucial about the nature of grace and the cruelty of the forces that control it. Among these forsaken souls, none exemplifies the despair of the abandoned quite like Roderika. You find her at Stormhill Shack, a small shelter along the path leading towards Stormvale Castle. She sits alone, wrapped in a red hood, her voice soft and shattered by trauma. This young woman traveled from lands beyond the lands between with a group of soldiers, companions who crossed the sea on her behalf, who fought for her. She speaks of them with grief so heavy it weighs on every word. They came for her, they died for her, and she could do nothing to prevent it. The soldiers who accompanied Roderika met a fate worse than simple death. Godric the Grafted, that twisted demigod who rules Stormvale Castle, took them. Arms ripped away, legs severed, heads removed from bodies. Not killed, but harvested. Their body parts were crudely stitched onto his grafted monstrosities, especially that massive spider-limbed abomination that lurks in the castle's depths. Roderika knows what happened to them. She can sense it somehow, feel their suffering echoing across the distance, and she is paralyzed by that knowledge, unable to move forward, unable to go back, frozen in grief and terror at this lonely shack on the hillside. But what makes Roderika's story particularly tragic is what she reveals about herself. She admits it with trembling shame. She has never once seen the guidance of grace. While other Tarnished see golden rays pointing toward their next destination, Roderika sees nothing. No direction, no purpose, no sign that she was truly meant to be here at all. She arrived in the lands between as Tarnished, marked by the call that brought so many others back. But grace itself seems to have abandoned her before she even began. This raises disturbing questions about the nature of grace and who truly receives it. Is grace selective, choosing some Tarnished over others based on unknown criteria, or is it withdrawn as punishment, denied to those deemed too weak to fulfill their purpose? Roderika seems to believe the latter. She speaks of her own inadequacy, her lack of strength, her failure to protect those who came with her. In her mind, she is not worthy of grace. And grace has confirmed this judgment by refusing to show itself to her. Without the guidance of grace, Roderika has no clear path forward. She cannot simply follow the golden light toward the next challenge, the next sight of grace, the next step on the journey to become Elden Lord. She is adrift in a world she does not understand, in a land actively hostile to her existence, with no divine hand to guide her. All she has are fragments of knowledge from others, rumors, desperate hopes, and the growing certainty that she will die here without accomplishing anything. The psychological impact of this abandonment cannot be overstated. Imagine being called to this place, dragged from whatever life you had before, told implicitly that you have a role to play, a destiny to fulfill. Now imagine arriving and finding you have been given no tools, no guidance, nothing to indicate what that role might be. You watch other Tarnished stride forward with confidence, because they can see where grace wants them to go, while you remain in the dark, fumbling blindly, questioning whether you were meant to be here at all. Roderika embodies a particular form of giving up, the surrender that comes not from repeated failure, but from never truly beginning. She has given up before even attempting to enter Stormvale Castle, before facing a single real challenge. The weight of being graceless, of losing her companions, of feeling fundamentally inadequate, has crushed her spirit before the journey could properly start. She sits at that shack, and if left alone, she might sit there forever, another Tarnished who never fulfilled whatever purpose brought them here. Yet Roderika's story has an additional chapter, one that offers a glimmer of hope amid the pervasive despair. If you show her kindness, if you find the chrysalid's memento from her fallen comrades and bring it to her, if you encourage her even in her darkness, something shifts. She moves to the roundtable hold, that gathering place of Tarnished champions. And there, with further encouragement, she discovers she possesses a gift. Spirit tuning, the ability to strengthen the ashes of the dead and help them serve the living more effectively. Through smithing Master Hugh's rough mentorship and your continued support, Roderika finds a purpose that does not require her to see grace. She cannot be a warrior, cannot march toward the Erdtree with sword in hand, but she can help others in their journey. She can honor the dead by ensuring their spirits fight with greater strength. She transforms from a girl paralyzed by despair, into someone with value, with purpose, with a reason to continue existing in this cruel world. Roderika's transformation reveals something important about giving up. It is not always permanent. Sometimes a Tarnished who has surrendered can find a new path, a different form of strength, a reason to persist that does not require them to fulfill the original impossible task. Not every Tarnished must become Elden Lord. Some can find meaning in other ways, supporting those who continue the fight, carving out small spaces of purpose in a world dominated by grand, terrible ambitions. But Roderika also represents the countless others who do not find that second path, who sit alone in ruins and shacks scattered across the lands between, waiting for death or madness to claim them. For every Roderika who finds her way to spirit tuning, how many others simply fade away, their names forgotten, their stories untold? How many Tarnished arrived without grace, without maidens, without hope, and found nothing but an unmarked grave in a land that never wanted them in the first place? Her story is both warning and lesson, a warning that grace is not guaranteed, that the divine forces claiming to support the Tarnished are capricious and cruel, a lesson that giving up can take many forms, that surrender is not always a conscious choice but sometimes a gradual erosion of hope until nothing remains. And perhaps most importantly, a reminder that in a world designed to break you, sometimes the greatest act of defiance is simply finding any reason at all to continue existing. Of all the Tarnished who attempted to become Elden Lord, none came closer to success than Vyke. His name resonates through the lands between as both inspiration and warning. He was the roundtable knight, a champion of such renown that his armor adorns marketing materials for this broken world. He collected great runes, defeated mighty foes, earned the love of an ancient dragon, and stood at the very threshold of the Erdtree itself. But in the end, Vyke did not become Elden Lord. Instead, he fell to the Frenzied Flame, his mind shattered, his body scorched by yellow fire. His failure became a testament to just how impossible the task truly is. Vyke's story begins with promise and power. He was a member of the ancient dragon cult, those who worshipped and learned from the great dragons that once ruled the skies above the lands between. Through this cult, Vyke met Lanciax, one of the most powerful dragons, sister to the mighty Fortisax. Dragons do not easily grant their favor to humans, but Lanciax did more than grant favor to Vyke. She loved him. Of all the knights she had known across the ages, he became her most beloved. She shared with him the secret incantations of the ancient dragons, power that could call down red lightning, that could channel the fury of storms themselves. Vyke mastered these incantations and developed his own technique, a signature move that would mark him as unique among all warriors. Vyke's Dragon Bolt. This incantation electrified his entire body and his spear, wreathing him in crackling red lightning that enhanced his attacks while reducing his lightning resistance. It was a devastating technique, a perfect fusion of dragon knowledge and warrior skill. It earned him the title Vyke the Dragon Spear. His reputation grew. His power became legendary. He joined the Roundtable Hold and was given the honor of being called Roundtable Knight, a title of tremendous prestige. As Vyke journeyed through the lands between, collecting great runes from fallen demigods, his path mirrored what any successful Tarnished would follow. He fought through the ruins of Stormvale, likely faced Godric the Grafted. He ventured into the Academy of Raya Lucaria, perhaps battled Renala in her full power. He crossed the hellscape of Caelid, stood against whatever horrors lurked in Volcano Manor, and made his way to Lendel itself, the royal capital, where the Erdtree towers over all. By all accounts, Vyke was unstoppable. The finger reader Enia, who serves the two fingers at the Roundtable Hold, mentions that she has only once before seen a Tarnished possess two great runes together. That Tarnished was almost certainly Vyke. Two great runes, two shards of the Elden Ring claimed from demigods, brought together by a single warrior. He was so close. Closer than any other before the player character arrived. He stood at the very threshold of becoming Elden Lord. And then he reached the mountaintops of the giants, and everything fell apart. To burn the thorns sealing the Erdtree, To gain access to the interior, where the Elden Ring waits, a Tarnished must kindle the forge of the giants. This requires a sacrifice of monumental weight, burning a finger maiden in the flames. The guidance says it is necessary, unavoidable, the only way forward. Melina explains it to the player character, offering herself as kindling. But what if you had a maiden you loved? What if the price of your ambition was watching someone precious to you burn alive, screaming in agony as divine fire consumed them? This was the choice Vyke faced. He had a finger maiden, a companion who had traveled with him through all his trials, who had turned his collected runes into strength, who stood beside him when the path grew darkest. Her name is lost to history, but her corpse can still be found at the Church of Inhibition in Eastern Liurnia, sitting peacefully beside a statue of Queen Marika, wearing the blood-stained dress of a finger maiden. Vyke stood at the forge and realized he could not do it, could not burn her, could not sacrifice her for his own ambition, no matter how great. The circumstances surrounding Vyke's fall remain partially shrouded in mystery, though the evidence suggests a tragic sequence of events. His armor's description poses a haunting question. Did he make his choice for his maiden, or did some other force lure him with suggestion? This could imply that Shabriri, that ancient deceiver, whose name has become synonymous with madness and frenzy, played a role in Vyke's decision. Below Lendel, deep beneath the capital, in the subterranean shunning grounds, there exists a place called the Cathedral of the Forsaken, and at the bottom of that cathedral, sealed behind a massive door, lie the three fingers, the counterpart to the two fingers, servants of the Frenzied Flame, rather than the greater will. Based on what we know of Vyke's situation, standing at the forge, unable to burn his maiden, and the fact that he subsequently traveled far below the capital, to be scorched by the flame of frenzy, we can infer that he sought an alternative. The Frenzied Flame would have offered exactly that, a way to burn the Erdtree himself, without needing to sacrifice his maiden. The yellow flame of chaos would serve as kindling instead. It would have seemed like the perfect solution, the escape from an impossible choice. So Vyke descended into the darkness beneath the capital and found the three fingers waiting. What happened next is suggested by the burn marks on his armor. The three fingers grant their blessing by clutching the recipient, searing their fingerprints directly into the flesh. But Vyke's burns appear on his armor itself. The iron armor singed and blistered by fingers, which could imply he kept his armor on during the embrace, perhaps hoping to limit the Frenzied Flame's influence, perhaps trying to maintain some control over the power he was accepting. Tradition would dictate removing all armor before the embrace, as the flames must touch bare flesh. If Vyke refused this, meeting the three fingers while armored, the yellow flames would have seared through metal and cloth, burning him but not completely overwhelming him, at least not immediately. At first, it seemed to work. Vyke emerged from beneath the capital with the power of the Frenzied Flame, but his mind still intact. He was still himself, still capable of reason, still the roundtable knight who had come so far. But the Frenzied Flame is not a power to be controlled or contained. It is madness incarnate, chaos given form. And it burned within Vyke like a slow poison, warping his thoughts, twisting his mind, driving him toward the singular goal of all who embrace the yellow flame, to burn the world and return all things to the one great. What happened next remains partially unclear. Vyke never became the Lord of Frenzied Flame. A ghostly figure near the Frenzied Flame village laments this fact, saying, "Ah, Lord Vyke, it seems that you were no lord after all." He never burned the Erdtree with chaos fire. Instead, he was imprisoned in an evergaol in the mountaintops of the giants, sealed away by forces that recognized the danger he posed. The circumstances of his imprisonment are never fully explained. Perhaps the roundtable hold turned on him when they discovered his heresy. Perhaps Queen Marika's loyal servants hunted him down. Or perhaps, and this is speculation based on the timing and location, Vyke himself, in a last moment of clarity, allowed himself to be imprisoned rather than complete the terrible transformation the Frenzied Flame demanded. His maiden, the woman he sought to save, died anyway. Her corpse can be found at the Church of Inhibition, wearing the blood-stained dress of a finger maiden. The exact circumstances of her death remain unclear. Some believe it was suicide, a final act of despair upon learning what Vyke had become, or from the shame of being spared when so many other maidens faced their fate at the forge. Others suggest she may have been murdered by those hunting Vyke, killed to prevent her from aiding the champion who had fallen to madness. The game provides no definitive answer, but the result is the same. Vyke's sacrifice was for nothing. He gave up his sanity, his humanity, his very soul, and he still could not save her. He could not become Elden Lord. He failed in every possible way. Today, two versions of Vyke remain as grim reminders of his fall. In the Evergoal, you can summon the version of Vyke that still retains some semblance of his former glory. Roundtable Knight Vyke, who fights with his spear and dragon incantations but no Frenzied Flame abilities. This is Vyke as he was meant to be, the champion who almost succeeded. But on the path leading to the Church of Inhibition, near his maiden's corpse, a different Vyke invades. Festering fingerprint Vyke, a red phantom consumed by yellow flame, throwing frenzied incantations while protecting the site of his greatest failure. Vyke's tragedy reveals the fundamental cruelty of the path to becoming Elden Lord. He did everything right. He was powerful enough, skilled enough, determined enough. He gathered great runes, mastered legendary techniques, earned the love of a dragon. But when faced with an impossible choice, burn his maiden or abandon his quest, he sought a third option and was destroyed for that very attempt. The Frenzied Flame promised an escape from the terrible demands of the Golden Order, but it only replaced one form of damnation with another. His story sends a chilling message to all Tarnished. Even the greatest among you will fail. Even those who come closer than any other will fall short. The price demanded is too high. The sacrifice is too terrible. The choice is too cruel. And if Roundtable Knight Vyke, beloved of Lanciax, wielder of dragon lightning, possessor of two great runes, could not become Elden Lord, what hope do lesser Tarnished have? Is it any wonder that so many, hearing whispers of Vyke's fate, choose to give up rather than continue toward inevitable failure? Grace is not permanent. This truth, perhaps more than any other, drives Tarnished to despair and surrender. The golden light in their eyes, the rays showing them where to go, the immortality that keeps them rising after each death. All of this can be stripped away at any moment without warning or explanation. Many Tarnished arrive in the lands between with grace burning bright, only to lose it later, often without understanding why. One moment they are blessed, divine favorites with a clear path forward. The next they are graceless again, mortal, abandoned with no purpose, and no protection in a world that has only grown more hostile. The mechanism of losing grace appears arbitrary and cruel. Queen Marika herself has demonstrated the power to withdraw grace at will. She did it to Godfrey and his warriors after they had served their purpose, stripping them of divine favor the moment peace was achieved, and their martial prowess was no longer needed. This establishes a terrifying precedent. Grace is conditional, dependent on the whims of powers beyond mortal comprehension. A Tarnished does not earn grace through virtue or lose it through sin. They possess it or do not based on whether higher powers currently find them useful. Item descriptions and NPC dialogue make clear that many Tarnished lost sight of grace after the initial return to the lands between. These are not Tarnished who died and gave up. These are warriors who were blessed, who began their journeys, who fought and struggled, only to have the guidance suddenly vanish. The golden rays disappeared. The light faded from their eyes, and they were left stranded, often in the middle of hostile territory, with no idea what they had done wrong or whether grace would ever return. The psychological impact of losing grace cannot be overstated. Imagine fighting through unimaginable dangers because you believe you are protected, guided, chosen for a great purpose. Every death you suffer is terrible but bearable because you know you will rise again, because grace grants you immortality. Then one day, after dying to some horror in a festering swamp or crumbling ruin, you do not resurrect immediately. The darkness lasts longer. The return is uncertain. And when you finally open your eyes, you realize the golden light is gone. You are mortal again. The next death might be your last. And you have no idea why. This abandonment creates multiple forms of despair. First is the immediate practical terror. You are suddenly vulnerable in ways you were not before. Enemies that were obstacles become lethal threats. Risks you took confidently become suicidal. You must completely change how you approach every situation because the safety net has been removed. Second is the loss of direction. Without the guidance of grace, you cannot see the path forward. You do not know where you should go or what you should do. The journey that had structure and purpose becomes aimless wandering in a hostile land. But perhaps worst is the psychological devastation of divine rejection. Grace is not merely a tool. It is affirmation, proof that you matter, that you have a role in the grand design. Losing it means being told wordlessly, but unmistakably, that you are no longer needed, no longer worthy, no longer part of whatever plan the greater will and Queen Marika have set in motion. You are disposable, discarded, cast aside like Godfrey before you. The emotional wound of such rejection can be more crippling than any physical injury. Many Tarnished who lost grace gathered at the roundtable hold, that sanctuary that exists outside normal space, a place where even the graceless could find temporary refuge. But the hold itself became a monument to failure and despair. Walk through its halls and you see Tarnished who have stopped trying. Some still maintain the appearance of purpose, going through motions of planning or studying, but their hearts are no longer in it. They have given up on becoming Elden Lord, even if they will not admit it aloud. The relationship between grace and mortality complicates the question of giving up. A Tarnished with grace cannot truly escape their burden through death because death only resets them to try again. But a Tarnished without grace can die permanently, can find release in oblivion. This creates a perverse incentive structure. The only way to escape the eternal struggle is to lose the very blessing that makes the struggle possible in the first place. Some Tarnished, driven mad by endless cycles of death and resurrection, might actively seek to lose grace just to gain the freedom to die permanently. We also see evidence that grace can be selectively withdrawn based on perceived performance or potential. Marika appears to evaluate Tarnished, judging whether they are making sufficient progress toward becoming Elden Lord. Those who stall, who fail repeatedly, who show weakness or hesitation. These might find their grace flickering, fading, eventually extinguishing entirely. This creates a horrifying feedback loop. Struggle leads to failure. Failure leads to loss of grace. Loss of grace makes further progress impossible, guaranteeing permanent failure. Consider the cruelty of this system. A Tarnished is called back from death or exile, promised the opportunity to become Elden Lord, given divine blessing and immortality. They throw themselves into the task, dying over and over in pursuit of this grand goal. But if they are not strong enough, not skilled enough, not lucky enough to progress at whatever pace the divine powers deem acceptable, grace is withdrawn. They are left with nothing. No direction, no immortality, no purpose. Stranded in the most dangerous place in existence. Abandoned by the very forces that dragged them here. The lands between are littered with corpses of these forsaken Tarnished. You find them everywhere, slumped against walls, sprawled in ditches, clutching weapons they can no longer wield. Some were Tarnished who lost grace and were then killed by the environment that no longer recognized them as protected. Others might have simply given up, sitting down in some quiet corner and waiting for something to end them. Without grace, without purpose, without hope, death becomes not a setback but a mercy. And what of those who lost grace but somehow survived? Those who retreated to the roundtable hold or found safe havens elsewhere? Who continued existing even after divine favor was withdrawn? These Tarnished face a different form of torture. Eternal life without purpose. Immortality without meaning. They watch other Tarnished come and go, some succeeding where they failed, others joining them in graceless limbo. They exist in a state of suspended animation, neither fully alive nor properly dead, waiting for nothing because there is nothing left to wait for. This is why losing grace represents one of the most common reasons Tarnished give up. Not because they choose to surrender, but because surrender is chosen for them. They are deemed insufficient and discarded by forces they cannot resist or appeal to. Their journey ends not with a final battle, but with silence. The golden light simply fading from their eyes, leaving them abandoned in a world that was never meant for them. And perhaps there is no crueler form of giving up than to have giving up forced upon you by the very gods who claimed to offer you salvation. Not all tarnished give up because they are weak or because grace abandons them. Sometimes the breaking point comes from a wound far deeper than physical pain or repeated failure. Sometimes it is grief that shatters a warrior's mind, loss that opens the door to madness. The story of Edgar and his daughter Irina illuminates this path from duty to despair, from honor to horror, showing how even the most dedicated soul can collapse when the weight of sorrow becomes too great to bear. Edgar serves as the Castellan of Castle Morn, a fortress on the southern tip of the Weeping Peninsula. His duty is clear: protect the castle's inhabitants and guard the grafted blade greatsword, a legendary weapon held in the castle's possession. He takes this responsibility seriously, remaining at his post even when the castle falls under siege by misbegotten, those leonine creatures that have rebelled against their human masters. The situation is dire. The castle is overrun. His soldiers fight a losing battle. But Edgar will not abandon his duty, will not leave his post until the sacred sword is secure. His daughter Irina waits beyond the castle, on the bridge of sacrifice. She is blind, vulnerable, terrified for her father's safety. She begs any passing Tarnished to deliver a letter to Edgar, to tell him she survived, to ask him to come back to her. There is desperation in her voice, a premonition perhaps, a sense that if Edgar does not leave the castle soon, something terrible will happen. She needs him. But Edgar, bound by honor and duty, refuses to abandon his post until the grafted blade greatsword is recovered from the leonine misbegotten that threatens to claim it. If you help Edgar, if you fight through the castle and defeat the misbegotten, if you claim the grafted blade and ensure it is safe, Edgar finally allows himself to leave. He returns to where Irina waits, ready to be reunited with his daughter, ready to bring her to safety. But he arrives too late. Irina lies dead on the bridge, blood staining her dress. The misbegotten, or perhaps other forces in this cruel land, found her while she was alone and defenseless. While Edgar remained at his post doing his duty, his daughter died alone and terrified, calling his name. Edgar collapses beside her body, overwhelmed by grief. He speaks of vengeance, of hunting down everyone responsible for this atrocity, of making them pay for what they have done to his innocent daughter. His voice trembles with rage and anguish. The dutiful Castellan is gone, replaced by a father who failed to protect the one person that mattered most. All his honor, all his dedication to duty, amounted to nothing in the face of this loss. He remained at his post and lost everything worth protecting. What happens next reveals the insidious danger of the Frenzied Flame and how it preys on the broken. Edgar does not simply die of grief beside his daughter. He rises, but he rises wrong. The loss has created a wound in his mind, a crack in his sanity through which something dark and terrible seeps in. Later, much later, in a place called the Revenger's Shack in western Liurnia of the Lakes, Edgar appears again. But he is no longer the man he was. When you approach the shack, Edgar invades as a hostile red phantom, attacking on sight with wild aggression. He fights with the Banished Knight's halberd, spinning it with the Spinning Strike's Ash of War, combining this with sacred incantations. But his technique is frenzied, desperate, driven by something beyond mere combat skill. This is Edgar, the Revenger, a man consumed by his need for justice, for retribution, for blood to answer blood. And when you inevitably defeat him, he drops a specific item that reveals what truly happened to his mind. A Shabriri grape. The Shabriri grape is significant. These cursed fruits are associated with the Frenzied Flame, with madness, with the influence of Shabriri himself, that ancient deceiver who tempts the broken and despairing. The grapes are manifestations of the yellow flame of chaos, born from despair and suffering. The fact that Edgar carries one suggests He did not merely go mad from grief. He was touched by the Frenzied Flame, whether through direct contact with the three fingers, or through the more insidious spread of madness that radiates from places steeped in suffering. The bodies scattered around the Revenger's shack tell their own story. Edgar hunted down and killed numerous people in his quest for vengeance. Perhaps some were misbegotten, genuine targets of his wrath, but others were likely innocent travelers, people who had nothing to do with Irina's death, slaughtered because Edgar's madness could no longer distinguish between guilty and innocent. His grief mutated into indiscriminate rage, and the Frenzied Flame fed on that rage, encouraging it, twisting it into something far darker. Edgar's story represents a specific form of giving up, the surrender to madness itself. He did not stop fighting. In fact, he fought more desperately than ever, but he gave up on being human, on maintaining his sanity, on distinguishing justice from mindless slaughter. The grief of losing Irina created a vulnerability, and the Frenzied Flame, always seeking cracks in human resolve, slipped through that vulnerability and consumed what remained of the dutiful Castellan. This pattern appears repeatedly in the lands between. Grief, loss, and suffering create openings for the Frenzied Flame to take root. The nomadic merchants, who were buried alive beneath Lendel, chanted curses of despair that summoned the three fingers. The villagers of the Frenzied Flame village, driven to collective anguish, manifested the yellow flame through their communal suffering. Even the Lindell soldiers on Mount Gelmir, traumatized by the horrors of battle, developed frenzied eyes from the psychological wounds they endured. Wherever hope dies and despair reigns, the Frenzied Flame finds fertile ground. Edgar's fate serves as a warning to all Tarnished. Your emotional wounds can be as dangerous as physical ones. The lands between does not merely test your combat skills and strategic thinking. It tests your ability to withstand loss, to maintain sanity when everything you love is taken from you, to keep fighting even when grief threatens to drown you. Edgar was a capable warrior, a dutiful father, an honorable man. But none of that mattered when his daughter died. The grief was simply too much. And in his vulnerability, the Frenzied Flame found another soul to corrupt. The cruel irony is that Edgar's dedication to duty is what enabled his daughter's death. If he had abandoned his post immediately, if he had prioritized Irina over the grafted blade greatsword, she might have lived. But he chose honor over love, duty over family. And the world punished him for that choice in the most horrific way possible. And then, in his broken state, the world offered him only one form of solace. The mad promise of the Frenzied Flame, the lie that burning everything away would somehow ease his pain. Edgar did not give up on becoming Elden Lord in any traditional sense. He likely never aspired to that throne. His giving up was more fundamental. He surrendered his humanity, his sanity, his very self. The man who was Edgar died beside his daughter on that bridge. What rose and hunted and killed in Liurnia was something else. Something that wore his body and wielded his weapon, but had been hollowed out and filled with yellow flame and madness. This too is a form of failure, a way for Tarnished to give up on their journey, not through death or abandonment, but through transformation into something that can no longer remember what it once fought for. Among all the Tarnished who gave up on becoming Elden Lord, perhaps none did so for more calculated reasons than Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, where others surrendered due to loss of grace, repeated failure, grief, or madness. Gideon's abandonment of the quest came from the very thing he valued most, knowledge itself. He learned too much, glimpsed truths that were meant to remain hidden, and what he discovered shattered his ambition so completely that he spent his final moments trying to prevent any other Tarnished from succeeding where he could not. Gideon is introduced as the leader of the roundtable hold, a figure of authority and wisdom among the gathered Tarnished. He calls himself the all-knowing, and the title is not mere boast. Gideon has built an extensive network of spies, informants, and agents throughout the lands between. He gathers information on demigods, on the location of great runes, on the weaknesses of powerful enemies. Other Tarnished bring him their discoveries, and he compiles this knowledge, studying it, analyzing it, searching for patterns and insights that might reveal the optimal path to becoming Elden Lord. When you first arrive at the roundtable hold, Gideon does not welcome you warmly. He acknowledges you as a visitor, but makes clear that you are not yet a true member of this fellowship. Only after you defeat a shardbearer and claim a great rune does he recognize you as worthy of his attention and knowledge. Then, and only then, does he share what he knows about the other shardbearers, Godric the Grafted, Renala Queen of the Full Moon, Starscourge Radon, Rykard Lord of Blasphemy, and Morgoth the Omen King. He provides tactical information, lore, context, everything a Tarnished might need to approach these battles with understanding rather than charging in blind. Gideon presents himself as an ally, a mentor of sorts, someone who shares your goal of standing before the Elden Ring. He speaks of accumulating knowledge as the path to power, suggesting that true understanding is what separates successful Tarnished from failures. Unlike warriors who rely purely on combat prowess, Gideon believes that being all-knowing will grant him the edge necessary to overcome impossible odds. Knowledge is his weapon, information his armor, and he wields both with impressive effectiveness. But Gideon has a darker side that becomes apparent to those who look closely. He maintains his network of spies through ruthless means. The Omen Killer in the village of the Albinorics, who committed atrocities against the Albinoric people, is implied to be one of Gideon's agents. When you acquire half of the Erdtree secret medallion, Ensha, one of Gideon's servants, invades and attempts to murder you to claim it. His adopted daughter Nephili discovers that he ordered terrible acts in pursuit of information, and he disowns her when she questions his methods. This reveals that Gideon's pursuit of knowledge is not merely academic. He is willing to sacrifice others, to commit atrocities, to betray trust and honor, all in service of accumulating the information he believes will secure his ascension. He is not a benevolent mentor but a calculating manipulator, using other Tarnished as tools, letting them take the risks while he remains safe in the roundtable hold, gathering their reports, learning from their experiences, preparing for the moment when he can step forward and claim the throne built on foundations of others' sacrifices. But something happens as Gideon's knowledge deepens. The more he learns about the lands between, about Queen Marika, about the true nature of the Elden Ring and the Golden Order, the more disturbed he becomes. References appear in item descriptions and dialogue to Gideon, glimpsing into the will of Queen Marika and shuddering in fear at what he found there. This is not merely tactical information about demigods or the location of great runes. This is something fundamental, something about the very purpose for which the Tarnished were called back, something that shook Gideon to his core. The full revelation comes when you finally face Gideon as a boss in Lendel Ashen Capital, after you have burned the Erdtree and progressed far enough that his hand is forced. He confronts you in the Erdtree Sanctuary, standing between you and your final approach to the Elden Ring. His dialogue reveals what he believes he has learned. "Ah, I knew you'd come. To stand before the Elden Ring, to become Elden Lord. What a sad state of affairs. I commend your spirit, but alas, none shall take the throne. Queen Marika has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle, unto eternity." This is Gideon's interpretation of what he glimpsed in Marika's will. According to his understanding, Queen Marika does not want a Tarnished to become Elden Lord. The entire endeavor, the promise that brought the Tarnished back from death and exile, the guidance that points them toward the Erdtree in his view, it's all designed for eternal struggle rather than resolution. Whether this is truly Marika's will or Gideon's fearful misinterpretation remains ambiguous. The armor description tells us he shuddered in fear at the end that should not be, but it doesn't definitively state what that end is or whether his conclusion about eternal struggle is accurate. Some interpret this as Marika genuinely wanting endless conflict. Others believe Gideon misunderstood what he saw, projecting his own fears onto fragments of divine will he could barely comprehend. Regardless of whether Gideon's interpretation is correct, this belief destroys him. His entire worldview was built on the assumption that becoming Elden Lord was the goal, that accumulating enough knowledge would allow him to achieve it. But if Marika herself in his understanding does not actually want anyone to succeed, then what is the point? All his scheming, all his sacrifices, all the information he gathered would be rendered meaningless. The path he was following would lead nowhere because the destination was never meant to be reached. The description of his armor confirms the impact of this revelation. Knowledge begins with the recognition of one's ignorance, the realization that the search for knowledge is unending. But when Gideon glimpsed into the will of Queen Marika, he shuddered in fear at the end that should not be. Despite all his knowledge, despite calling himself all-knowing, what he learned, or believed he learned, about Marika's true intentions terrified him so deeply that he abandoned his goal entirely. But Gideon does not simply give up and walk away. In his final moments, he does something more destructive. Whether driven by his interpretation of Marika's will or by his own fear of change and the end of the eternal seeking he valued, he tries to ensure that no other Tarnished succeeds either. If he cannot, or should not, become Elden Lord, if the quest itself is, in his view, not meant to conclude, then he will prevent anyone else from completing it. He stands in your path and fights with everything he has learned, using spells and incantations gathered from across the lands between, techniques that mirror the very shardbearers you defeated on your journey. He uses your own victories against you, turning knowledge into weaponry in a last desperate attempt to maintain what he believes Marika desires, or what he fears to lose. When you defeat him, Gideon's final words are heavy with resignation. I know, in my bones, a Tarnished cannot become a lord. Not even you. A man cannot kill a god. Amen non nomen beros. A man cannot kill a god. Noiven vu, noivu. A man cannot kill a god. On monuan. A man cannot kill a god. Even in death, even after being proven wrong by your very presence standing over his corpse, he clings to the belief that the quest is impossible. The knowledge that broke him remains his truth until the end. Gideon's story represents perhaps the most intellectual form of giving up, the surrender that comes from understanding or believing you understand too much. Where other Tarnished fail due to insufficient strength or courage, Gideon fails because his pursuit of knowledge led him to what he interpreted as a truth that made the entire endeavor seem pointless. He suffered from a form of analysis paralysis, gathering information endlessly because taking action required risking failure, and his failure would prove that knowledge alone is insufficient. The irony is profound. Gideon calls himself the all-knowing, but true omniscience would have revealed his interpretation was even correct. That Marika herself is not omnipotent, that her desires, whatever they truly are not absolute law, that even a goddess's will can be defied by a Tarnished with sufficient determination. If Gideon had simply acted instead of endlessly learning, if he had taken the risks he sent others to take, he might have succeeded. But he waited too long, learned, or thought he learned, too much. And the weight of what he believed to be terrible knowledge crushed his ambition before he ever truly began. His story warns all Tarnished. Sometimes ignorance is strength. Sometimes not knowing the full truth, or not understanding what fragments of truth you've glimpsed, allows you to attempt the impossible. Sometimes the greatest danger is not lack of knowledge but possessing knowledge, or believing you possess it, that makes hope seem foolish. Gideon gave up not because he was too weak, but because he believed himself too informed, not because he could not fight, but because he understood, or thought he understood, too well why fighting might be futile. And in trying to spare others from what he considered inevitable failure, or in trying to maintain what he believed was Marika's design, he became the very obstacle he once claimed to help Tarnished overcome. Among all the forces in the lands between that caused Tarnished to give up, none is more insidious than the Frenzied Flame. This power does not merely defeat warriors or strip away grace. It offers something far more dangerous, an alternative to the impossible struggle. A promise that if you cannot fix this broken world, you can at least burn it all away. The yellow flame of chaos represents the ultimate form of surrender, the moment when a Tarnished looks at the madness around them and decides that destruction is preferable to continuation. The frenzied flame manifests in the eyes of those stricken by grief, suffering, and despair so profound that it transcends individual anguish and becomes something collective, something cosmic. It is not fire in any conventional sense, but rather the visible manifestation of minds breaking, of sanity fracturing, of souls reaching a point where the only response to unbearable existence is to wish for oblivion. Those afflicted with frenzy develop yellow eyes that weep tears of flame. They gain an insatiable urge to spread this condition to others, to share their madness, as if company in suffering might somehow lessen the pain. The origins of the frenzied flame are murky, wrapped in ancient tragedy, and what followers believe to be divine mistakes. According to lore conveyed through Melina's interpretation of the Three Fingers message, all that there is came from the One Great. Then came fractures and births and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so, according to this philosophy, what was borrowed must be returned. Melt it all away with the yellow chaos flame until all is one again. This philosophy is seductive to the broken. It reframes the suffering of the lands between not as individual failures or unfortunate circumstances, but as fundamental errors in creation itself. In this view, the greater will, in dividing the One Great into separate beings, into distinct lives and deaths, created the very conditions for suffering. Individuality itself becomes the mistake. Separation becomes the source of all pain. The frenzied flame promises to correct this by burning away all divisions, melting all distinctions, returning everything to an undifferentiated unity where suffering cannot exist because there is no individual consciousness left to experience it. For a Tarnished who has struggled and died countless times, who has watched companions fall, who has been betrayed and abandoned and broken, this message carries terrible appeal. The Golden Order demands endless fight toward a goal that may be impossible. Grace offers immortality, but only to suffer forever. The Two Fingers provide guidance that leads to sacrificing those you love. But the frenzied flame offers escape, not victory, not healing, not redemption, but the total annihilation of all that causes pain. If you cannot win, at least you can ensure that the game itself ceases to exist. The history of the frenzied flame in the current age is written in tragedy. Deep beneath Lendil, in the Cathedral of the Forsaken, the Three Fingers wait in darkness. This place is part of an ancient tomb, suggesting the frenzied flame or its servants may have existed before the Golden Order, perhaps even before the Erdtree itself. But the cathedral's current significance stems from a more recent horror. The persecution of the nomadic merchants, these merchants who traveled throughout the lands between, trading goods and offering services, were falsely accused of heretical practices. Based on the evidence found in the depths, the entire caravan was rounded up and buried alive beneath Lendil, sealed in darkness with no hope of escape. In their torment, trapped in the suffocating dark, facing slow death by starvation or madness, the merchants reached a collective breaking point. They chanted curses of despair together, and those curses, according to the law, manifested the yellow flame. The Three Fingers appeared, drawn by their anguish, and granted them what they would call the blessing of frenzy. But frenzy did not save the merchants. It only changed the nature of their suffering. Some went mad, their minds fracturing beyond repair. Others died but continued to wander as spirits, trapped between life and death, repeating their mantras of despair. Melt it all away, and may chaos take the world. Their false accusation and brutal punishment created one of the most concentrated sources of the frenzied flame in all the lands between, a wellspring of madness that continues to spread its influence centuries later. This pattern repeats throughout the lands between. Wherever suffering reaches critical mass, the frenzied flame appears. The villagers of the frenzied flame village in Liurnia, driven to collective anguish by unknown tragedies, manifest the yellow flame through their communal howling. They are not individual madmen but a chorus of despair, their voices joining together to sustain a massive sphere of frenzied fire that floats above their tower, driving away any who approach. They have surrendered to madness as a community, finding in shared frenzy something that individual sanity could no longer provide. Even the soldiers of Lendel, who fought on Mount Gelmir, bear the mark of the Frenzied Flame. That battle was particularly horrific, a conflict so brutal that it traumatized even hardened warriors. The psychological wounds inflicted on that cursed mountain were so severe that some soldiers developed frenzied eyes, their minds unable to process what they had witnessed and done. They did not seek out the Three Fingers or embrace chaos willingly. The Frenzied Flame simply found them in their broken state and claimed them. The appeal of the Frenzied Flame to Tarnished is straightforward. It offers an end. Not victory, not glory, not the throne of Elden Lord, but the cessation of struggle itself. A Tarnished can embrace the Three Fingers, accept the mark of frenzy, and become the Lord of Frenzied Flame. This grants immense power, the ability to burn the Erdtree without needing to sacrifice a maiden, access to incantations of terrible destructive force, but it comes at the cost of having no purpose beyond destruction. The Lord of Frenzied Flame has one task: incinerate all that divides and distinguishes, burn the world back to the one great. This is giving up in its purest form. It is the moment when a Tarnished looks at the impossible task before them and decides that if they cannot complete it, they will ensure no one else can either. It is choosing oblivion over continued struggle, non-existence over eternal suffering. The Frenzied Flame does not promise to make the broken world better. It promises to make the world not exist at all. And for souls crushed beneath the weight of despair, that promise can seem like salvation. Vyke fell to this temptation, choosing frenzy over burning his maiden. Edgar succumbed after losing his daughter, the grief opening a door for madness. Countless others, named and nameless, have found their way to the Three Fingers or been consumed by the spreading influence of frenzied fire. Some, like travelers who sought to control the flame for power, discovered too late that the Frenzied Flame cannot be mastered. Every attempt to use it as a tool ended in catastrophic failure, the would-be controllers consumed by the madness they tried to wield. The incantations of the Frenzied Flame reflect this danger. Spells like Flame of Frenzy and Frenzied Burst build madness in both the caster and the target. To use the power is to accelerate your own descent into insanity. For Tarnished, the yellow flame represents the darkest possible surrender. It is not merely failing to become Elden Lord, but choosing to burn away the possibility of anyone ever succeeding. It is transforming personal despair into cosmic destruction. It is deciding that if you cannot have peace, then no one can have anything at all. And the tragedy is that for souls broken enough, this seems like the only honest option left. The Golden Order is corrupt, the Greater Will is cruel, the quest is impossible, and the lands between is saturated with suffering. Why not just burn it all and be done? This is why the Frenzied Flame is so dangerous. It does not attack Tarnished with armies or monsters. It whispers to them in their darkest moments, offering release disguised as power, surrender disguised as defiance. And for every Tarnished who resists that whisper, countless others have listened, embraced the yellow flame, and given up not just on becoming Elden Lord, but on the very idea that existence is worth preserving. The lands between are vast, and within that broken realm, countless Tarnished have attempted the journey to become Elden Lord. Most fail, most give up. While figures like Vyke, Roderika, Edgar, and Gideon represent the most documented examples of failure and surrender, they are merely the most visible among countless others. Walk through any region, and you will find evidence of Tarnished who tried and fell short, warriors whose stories ended in unmarked graves, whose names will never be remembered, whose struggles vanished into the silence of this dying world. Consider Nephili Lu, a warrior of considerable skill and the adopted daughter of Gideon Ofnir. She fights alongside you against Godric the Grafted, proving herself a capable combatant. She speaks of justice, of protecting the downtrodden, of elevating her adoptive father to the throne of Elden Lord. Nephili is one of the few Tarnished who seems to have maintained both grace and purpose, fighting not for personal glory but for a better world under Gideon's rule. She is strong, dedicated, idealistic, everything a champion should be. But then, she witnesses the aftermath of the massacre at the village of the Albinorics. The Omen killer committed atrocities there, and based on Nephili's reaction and Gideon's network of agents, the evidence suggests this was done in the name of gathering information, possibly under Gideon's orders. Nephili, confronting her father with this horror, discovers that Gideon not only knew about it but seemingly sanctioned it. The realization that her father, the man she would do anything for, is willing to sacrifice innocent lives for his schemes shatters her. Gideon disowns her for indulging her emotions and being a pawn that's offering, making clear that to him she is just another tool, valuable only as long as she serves his purposes. After this betrayal, Nephili falls into profound despair. She can be found sitting in the basement of the roundtable hold near smithing master Hugh, staring at nothing. She has not lost grace, has not been physically defeated, but her spirit has been broken. The purpose that drove her no longer exists. She cannot serve a father willing to commit monstrosities. She cannot become Elden Lord herself, lacking the ambition or perhaps the ruthlessness such ascension requires. She sits in darkness and asks to be left alone, a warrior paralyzed by disillusionment and grief. Nephili can be saved, given new purpose through your intervention, eventually becoming the ruler of Limgrave. But how many other Tarnished suffered similar betrayals without anyone to help them recover? How many discovered that those they trusted were corrupt, that their ideals were illusions, and found no path forward? Nephili's near surrender illuminates a common pattern. Tarnished give up not necessarily because the enemies are too strong, but because the reasons they were fighting prove hollow. Without purpose, even the strongest warrior becomes a shell. Then there is Dialos Hoslo, a nobleman and Tarnished who arrives at the roundtable hold speaking grandly of becoming a champion. He wears fine armor, carries himself with aristocratic bearing, and speaks of his servant Lanya, whom he seeks to find and protect. Dialos represents a particular type of Tarnished. Those who come to the lands between with privilege, with resources, with every advantage, yet still fail because privilege does not equal competence or courage. Dialos searches for Lanya, and when he finds evidence that she was killed, he vows vengeance. But his vengeance is hollow. He joins Volcano Manor not out of genuine belief in their cause, but because he does not know what else to do. He participates in their hunts, killing other Tarnished at their direction, but without conviction. Eventually, Dialos moves to Jarburg, a village of living jars, seeking something resembling peace or purpose. He tries to protect the jars when poachers attack, and he fails. Dialos is mortally wounded. The jars he tried to save are killed or captured, and he dies believing himself a coward who could not protect anyone. Dialos never became Elden Lord. He never truly tried. His journey through the lands between was one long failure to find courage, to commit to any path, to prove he was more than a nobleman playing at being a warrior. His final words, spoken as he lies dying, carry the weight of a life wasted. I only hope that House Hoslo's good name will be remembered. Not his own deeds, not his own honor. Just the family name he inherited and never lived up to. Dialos gave up gradually across a journey that saw him consistently taking the easier path, avoiding harder choices until he found himself dying in a forgotten village for a cause he stumbled into by accident. Recusant Bernal presents another form of failure. He is a veteran, a warrior of genuine skill and experience. He teaches ashes of war from his shack in Limgrave, and later you can find him at Volcano Manor participating in their hunts. But Bernal is a man who has already given up on the conventional path to becoming Elden Lord. He became a recusant, one who hunts other Tarnished, killing fellow travelers on the same journey he once undertook. If you follow his questline, you learn hints that Bernal once made it far into the journey. Evidence suggests he reached crumbling Farum Azula, where Malekith the Black Blade guards destined death itself. His dialogue and the equipment he carries, particularly his maiden's weapon and armor, imply that his maiden fell in that battle or in the journey leading to it. Based on these clues, we can infer that Bernal survived but could not bring himself to continue alone. He turned away from the Erdtree, abandoned the quest, and became a hunter of Tarnished instead. He kills others who still have hope, perhaps out of bitterness, perhaps believing he is sparing them from the fate his maiden suffered, perhaps simply because it is easier than trying again. Bernal's invasion in crumbling Farum Azula, if you trigger it, sees him returning to the place where his quest ended. He fights you with everything he has, and when he dies he drops his maiden's weapon and armor. He carried them all this time, unable to let go, unable to move forward, trapped between a quest he abandoned and a loss he could not accept. Bernal is what many Tarnished become. Survivors who stopped trying, who turned their skills toward other purposes, because the original goal proved too painful to pursue. The corpses scattered throughout the lands between tell countless other stories. In Limgrave alone, you find dead Tarnished everywhere. Outside the Church of Ele, in ditches along the road, slumped in ruins, clutching weapons they could no longer wield. Some likely died early, overwhelmed by the most basic enemies. Others may have progressed further before meeting their end. Each represents a journey that started with the same promise as yours but ended in an unmarked grave. Their stories unknown, their struggles forgotten. In Stormvale Castle, you can see the fate of Tarnished, who attempted to reach Godric and failed. Some are grafted onto his abominations, their body parts merge with others in grotesque amalgamations. Others fill the piles of corpses scattered throughout the castle. These were Tarnished who likely had grace, who saw the golden rays pointing toward this castle, who believed they could defeat the Lord of Grafting and claim his great rune. They were wrong, and their reward for trying was to become components in Godric's twisted experiments, or food for the soldiers and creatures that infest his domain. Travel to Caelid and the bodies multiply. The scarlet rot that saturates that cursed land kills Tarnished as easily as any other living thing. You find their corpses rotted beyond recognition, scattered across the poisoned swamps, lying in the ruins of fortresses where they sought shelter but found only death. Some made it to Redmane Castle, hoping to participate in the festival and defeat Starscourge Raiden. They died in the attempt, their bodies left to rot alongside the countless soldiers and warriors who fell during the shattering war and never rose again. In Lendel, the royal capital, you encounter perfumers, nobles, and soldiers who wear the trappings of civilization, but are no less deadly than any monster. The Tarnished who made it this far, who survived everything the early regions could throw at them, often died in these golden streets, killed by knights in gleaming armor, by dragons perched on bridges, by Morgoth himself defending his capital against all who would claim the Erdtree. And then there are those in the roundtable hold who have not died but have simply stopped. Tarnished sit in corners, stare at walls, go through the motions of existence without purpose. They attend meetings of the roundtable out of habit, but no longer contribute meaningful ideas. They have given up without dying, trapped in a liminal space between life and true death, waiting for something to release them from the burden of continued existence. Each of these failures, from the named characters whose stories you can follow to the nameless corpses you loot for their equipment, represents a choice. At some point, consciously or not, they gave up. The giving up might have been sudden, a death they could not overcome, a betrayal they could not process, a loss they could not bear. Or it might have been gradual, a slow erosion of hope, a fading of grace, a mounting accumulation of failures until continuing seemed pointless. The sheer number of failures in the lands between is staggering. For every Tarnished who stands before the Elden Ring, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, have given up along the way. Their equipment becomes loot for those who follow. Their bodies become landmarks for navigation. Their failures become warnings, or for some, examples of what not to do. But mostly, they simply fade into the background, indistinguishable from all the other corpses and ruins that litter this broken world. This litany of failure serves a purpose beyond mere documentation. It establishes that giving up is not aberration but norm. Most Tarnished fail. Most give up. The journey to become Elden Lord is designed to filter out all but the most determined, skilled, and lucky. Everyone else, the vast majority, will fall short. They will surrender or be killed or lose grace, or go mad, or simply stop trying. And the world will continue on uncaring, adding their corpses to the countless others already decorating the landscape. To understand why so many Tarnished give up, we must confront the brutal reality of what becoming Elden Lord actually requires. This is not merely a difficult task or a challenging quest. It is a journey designed to be nearly impossible. A test that demands you defeat beings who have terrorized the lands between for ages, who have powers beyond mortal comprehension, who represent the very pinnacle of strength in this world. The standards for godhood are not merely high. They are deliberately, crushingly, almost impossibly severe. Begin with the Shardbearers themselves, the demigods who claimed fragments of the shattered Elden Ring. These are not ordinary warriors. Senses. These are not ordinary warriors. These are not ordinary warriors. They are the offspring of Queen Marika, God-touched beings who possess not only immense personal power but also great runes, fragments of divinity that amplify their already terrible might. Each Shardbearer commands armies, controls vast territories, and has survived the shattering war, a conflict so brutal it broke the world itself. They have fought each other to a stalemate, none capable of claiming all the great runes, creating an equilibrium of power maintained by mutual deterrence. Godric the Grafted, considered the weakest of the Shardbearers, commands Stormvale Castle and has grafted body parts from countless warriors onto himself, creating a grotesque amalgam of flesh and power. Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, presides over the Academy of Raya Lucaria, a master of sorcery whose very presence warps reality. Starscourge Radon holds back the very stars through sheer gravitational force, a demigod so mighty that even while rotting from Melania's scarlet bloom, he remains one of the deadliest beings in the lands between. Vyke, Lord of Blasphemy, fed himself to the god-devouring serpent and became something more than god or serpent, a fusion of divine and primordial power. And these are merely the Shardbearers you must defeat to progress. Beyond them wait even greater challenges. Melania, Blade of Miquella, stands as perhaps the most skilled warrior in the entire world. Undefeated in combat despite being cursed with scarlet rot from birth, she brought Radahn himself to a stalemate by blooming and flooding Caelid with rot, creating a wasteland that persists to this day. Fighting Melania means facing someone who has never known defeat, whose every movement is perfection, whose rot can kill you with mere proximity. Mohg, Lord of Blood, rules over the Mohgwyn Palace, having built an entire dynasty in service to the Formless Mother. His power over blood and his ambition to create a new age make him a terrifying opponent. Morgott the Grace-Given guards Lendel, and the approach to the Erdtree, a demigod who, despite being born an omen, remained loyal to the Golden Order, fighting to preserve what his siblings sought to claim. He has repelled countless invasions, defeated numerous Tarnished who came before you. His strength is matched only by his dedication. But even after defeating all the Shardbearers, even after claiming their great runes, and proving yourself worthy of approaching the Erdtree, the impossible standards continue. To burn away the thorns sealing the Erdtree, you must light the Forge of the Giants, a task requiring the sacrifice of your maiden or embracing the Frenzied Flame. Then you must fight through crumbling Farum Azula, a timeless storm-tossed ruin where you face the hardened veterans of the ancient Dragon War. And there waits Malekith the Black Blade, wielder of destined death itself. The demigods fear Malekith. Marika herself appointed him as the guardian of the Rune of Death, specifically because his power made him capable of killing gods. Fighting Malekith means facing someone who can kill anything, whose blade bypasses all the immortality and divine protection that might otherwise keep you alive. This is the warrior who served as the ultimate deterrent against even the mightiest demigods, and you must defeat him to progress. Beyond Malekith, you must face Godfrey, first Elden Lord, returned to the lands between in the form of Horaloo. This is the warrior who conquered the lands between in the age of the Erdtree's founding, who defeated the giants and the Storm Lord, who was so mighty that he had to be exiled, because there were no more foes worthy of his prowess. When you fight him, you face not just a skilled combatant, but the progenitor of all Tarnished, the first and perhaps greatest of his kind. And finally, at the very end, awaits the Elden Beast itself, not a god, not a demigod, not a mortal elevated to divinity. The Elden Beast is a direct vassal of the greater will, a being that, yes, the Elden Ring, the physical embodiment of order itself. You are not fighting a person or even a concept. You are fighting the fundamental cosmic force that has shaped reality in the lands between. The Elden Beast is essentially the direct will of an outer god made manifest, and you must destroy it to claim the throne. Consider what this journey demands. You must be skilled enough to defeat the greatest warriors in the world, beings who have trained for centuries, who possess divine power, who command the very forces of nature. You must be intelligent enough to navigate the treacheries of the lands between, to avoid or overcome traps both physical and political, to solve puzzles that have stumped others, to find hidden paths where the obvious routes lead only to death. You must be resilient enough to die hundreds, perhaps thousands of times, and continue rising. Each death is real pain, real terror, real failure. But you cannot allow those failures to break you. You must learn from each death, adapt, improve, and try again. The psychological fortitude required to continue through endless death and resurrection, to maintain determination when hope seems foolish, is perhaps the greatest demand of all. You must be lucky. No amount of skill guarantees success when facing enemies of this caliber. A single mistake, one moment of inattention, a fraction of a second too slow, and you die. You must navigate encounters where the margin for error is effectively zero, where even optimal play can still fail due to factors beyond your control. Some Tarnished may be strong enough and skilled enough and still fail simply because fortune turns against them at the worst possible moment. And through all of this, you must maintain enough humanity to remember why you are fighting. It would be easy to become a monster, to embrace the Frenzied Flame, to fall to bloodlust or rot or madness. The journey to become Elden Lord does not merely test your combat prowess. It tests whether you can reach godhood without losing yourself in the process, whether you can claim divine power while remaining someone who should wield it. These impossible standards explain why so many Tarnished give up. It is not weakness. It is not cowardice. It is the rational response to impossible odds. When faced with the reality of what becoming Elden Lord requires, when you understand that you must defeat not just powerful enemies but literal gods and the embodiment of cosmic order itself, surrender begins to seem not like failure but like wisdom. Why throw yourself against these impossible challenges when failure is all but guaranteed? Vyke came closer than any other and still failed. If someone of his power and skill and determination could not succeed, what hope do lesser Tarnished have? The standards for godhood are not merely high. They are designed to be unreachable, to ensure that only the absolute pinnacle of determination, skill, and fortune can possibly succeed. Everyone else, the vast majority, will break against these standards like waves against cliffs. They will give up or die trying or go mad in the attempt, and the lands between will barely notice, adding their failures to the countless others that have come before. Throughout this exploration of failure and surrender, one question lingers. If so many Tarnished give up, if the journey is designed to be nearly impossible, if even the greatest champions like Vyke fall short, how does the player character succeed? What separates the Tarnished of no renown from all the other nameless warriors who died in ditches or gave up in despair? The answer is complex, layered, both practical and metaphysical. First, consider the unique circumstances of your arrival. You are described as a Tarnished of no renown, someone without reputation or recognition. This seems like a disadvantage until you realize it also means you carry no expectations, no weight of past failures, no reputation to live up to or crumble beneath. You are a blank slate. And in a world where everyone else is defined by their histories, being undefined becomes a strange form of power. More significantly, you are chosen by Torrent. This spectral steed appears to no one else, serves no other Tarnished. The reasons for this choice remain mysterious. But Torrent's previous master may have been Vyke himself, or Ranni, or another significant figure. Regardless, Torrent sees something in you worth serving, and this choice matters. Ranni herself acknowledges this, offering you an accord partially, because Torrent chose you. The spectral steed provides mobility, companionship, a connection to forces that predate the Golden Order. Most Tarnished stumble through the lands between on foot, exhausted, easy prey. You ride. You also meet Melina. While other Tarnished either have maidens who will eventually need to be burned or have no maiden at all, you encounter someone different. Melina is not a traditional finger maiden. She was burned and bodiless before you met her. And she offers to serve as your maiden not out of duty to the two fingers, but for her own mysterious purposes involving the Erdtree. She turns your runes into strength, grants you access to the spectral steed, guides you to the roundtable hold, and eventually offers herself as kindling for the forge. But unlike a traditional maiden, Melina acts with agency, pursuing her own goals that align with, but are not subservient to yours. This matters because it means you are not burdened with the guilt of burning an innocent to achieve your ambitions. Melina chooses this fate, seeks it even, making the sacrifice at the forge less about your cruelty and more about her purpose. Other Tarnished face an impossible moral choice. You face a tragic but collaborative one. This difference, subtle but profound, allows you to continue where others might be broken by guilt. But there is another factor, one that transcends the narrative and touches on something more fundamental. You cannot give up because you are the player. The fourth wall between game and player creates a unique form of determination. When a fictional Tarnished dies repeatedly to the same boss, despair sets in. They feel every failure, question their abilities, wonder if continuing is worth the pain. But when you die as the player, the emotional weight is different. Frustration, certainly. Anger, sometimes. But not the existential despair of someone whose entire existence is defined by this quest. You can put the game down, take a break, return refreshed. You can look up strategies, learn from other players, adapt your approach with knowledge from outside the world itself. You have resources no in-world Tarnished possesses. If you fail 100 times, you can try 101. If a boss seems impossible, you can level up, find better equipment, summon help. The options available to you are functionally limitless, because you exist partially outside the framework that binds the fictional Tarnished. This creates a paradox. In universe, you are exceptionally determined, persistent beyond all reason, capable of rising from any failure. But that determination is partly a function of being a player character, of having a player's relationship to death and failure. The Tarnished who stands before the Elden Ring is defined by a supernatural level of persistence that makes sense only when you understand they are being controlled by someone for whom failure is reset, not ending. There is also the mechanical reality of gameplay progression. You gain strength, not just narratively, but systemically. Each death teaches you enemy patterns. Each area explored grants you new tools. Each boss defeated makes you objectively more powerful through levels, equipment upgrades, new spells, and abilities. The player Tarnished grows stronger at a rate that would be impossible for most in-world warriors, accelerating from barely capable of fighting soldiers to strong enough to kill gods in a time frame that, while feeling long to the player, is narratively compressed. Most Tarnished who fail do not have this exponential growth. They improve linearly, if at all, and the challenges they face scale with or beyond their capabilities. They hit plateaus, face enemies that are simply too strong for their current level and have no way to efficiently grind for additional power. The player character benefits from a gameplay system designed to ensure progression, to make victory eventually achievable through persistence and growth. In-world Tarnished lack this structural advantage. Then there is the flame of ambition. Item descriptions and dialogue reference this quality, suggesting that some Tarnished simply burn with greater determination than others. Your character, mechanically and narratively, does not give up. When Melina asks why you seek to become Elden Lord, you can provide various answers, but all share one theme: you will not stop. This inexhaustible ambition, this refusal to surrender no matter the cost, distinguishes you from those who faltered. Is this ambition innate, or is it forged by your unique circumstances? Perhaps both. You begin with nothing, no reputation, no clear direction beyond become Elden Lord. But you are given tools, Torrent Melina, grace that does not fade, that enable you to translate ambition into progress. Other Tarnished may have equal ambition, but lack the means to effectively pursue it. You have both will and way, ambition and ability, determination and destiny aligned. There is also something to be said about knowledge, specifically the player's knowledge. You learn from a community of other players, from guides and wikis and strategies developed by millions of attempts. The challenges that kill lone Tarnished repeatedly can be overcome by a player who has watched videos, read breakdowns, understood the mechanics. This collective intelligence, this hive mind of player knowledge, creates a form of wisdom no in-world character could access. You are not just one Tarnished learning through trial and error. You are the beneficiary of countless other players' experiences distilled into actionable information. Finally, there is narrative necessity. You succeed because the story requires a victor. In-world Tarnished exist in a reality where most fail because that is the nature of their world. But you exist in a game designed to be completable, a story structured to have an ending. The Tarnished of no renown succeeds because success, while difficult, must be achievable. The game can be beaten. The Elden Beast can be defeated. The throne can be claimed. Not because it is easy, not because you are inherently superior to Vyke or Bernal or any other failed champion, but because you are the protagonist of an experience crafted to culminate in victory for those who persist. This does not diminish the achievement. It reframes it. You succeed where others failed not because you are fundamentally different, but because you have advantages they did not. Persistence they could not maintain, knowledge they could not access. You are the exception, the outlier, the 1 in 10,000 who does not give up even when giving up seems rational. And that exceptionalism, that refusal to join the countless corpses littering the lands between, is what transforms a Tarnished of no renown into Elden Lord. But we should not forget, your success is built on a foundation of others' failures. Every piece of equipment you loot came from a Tarnished who died. Every site of grace you rest at marks a place where others sought refuge and often found only death. Every shardbearer you defeat is one that killed countless others before you. Your journey to the throne is paved with the broken dreams and shattered bodies of all who tried and failed before you. And that terrible truth is part of what makes your success meaningful. The golden light of grace beckons across the fog, calling the dead from their graves, summoning the exiled back to the home that cast them out. It promises glory, divinity, the throne of Elden Lord. But the path it illuminates is littered with the broken and the despairing, with champions who surrendered and warriors who lost themselves. For every Tarnished who stands before the Elden Ring, thousands upon thousands have given up along the way, their stories ending not in triumph, but in exhaustion, madness, grief, or the seductive escape of the Frenzied Flame. We have walked among these failures, traced the threads of their surrender. Roderika, who never saw grace and found herself paralyzed by inadequacy until kindness showed her a different path. Vyke, who came closer than any other to becoming Elden Lord, but could not sacrifice his maiden and fell to frenzy in his desperate search for an alternative. Nephili, shattered by her father's betrayals, her idealism meeting the cruel reality of the lands between. Edgar, broken by grief so profound that the frenzied flame slipped through the cracks in his sanity. Gideon Ofnir, who learned too much and was crushed under the weight of terrible knowledge. These are not stories of weakness. They are stories of human limits tested beyond endurance. They are warnings about what the journey demands and what it takes from those who attempt it. The lands between does not merely want you to defeat powerful enemies. It wants you to sacrifice everything. Your companions, your sanity, your very humanity. It demands you become something more than human, while somehow remaining human enough that godhood does not corrupt you completely. The cruelty of the system is deliberate. Queen Marika, the greater will. The two fingers all appear to have designed this journey as a filter, a crucible that burns away everyone except the absolute most determined. But Gideon's revelation adds a darker layer. Perhaps the journey is not meant to have a victor at all. Perhaps the true purpose is the eternal struggle itself, countless tarnished fighting and dying forever, maintaining through their suffering some cosmic balance, some divine entertainment, some unfathomable purpose that has nothing to do with actually becoming Elden Lord. If this is true, then every Tarnished who gives up is making a rational choice. Why participate in a rigged game? Why throw yourself against impossible odds for a goal that was never meant to be achieved? The Frenzied Flame's promise to burn it all away begins to seem not like madness but like the only honest response. If the system is designed to create endless suffering, then destroy the system itself. Melt it all away. Return everything to the one great where suffering cannot exist. But there is another way to understand these failures and surrenders. Perhaps giving up is not always weakness. Perhaps knowing when to stop, when to step back, when to say, "This is not my path," requires its own form of strength. Roderika gave up on being a warrior but found purpose in spirit tuning. Many Tarnished in the roundtable hold gave up on becoming Elden Lord but continued to contribute in other ways, offering goods and services that help other champions on their journeys. Not everyone must claim the throne for their existence to have value. The cost of ambition in the lands between is measured in corpses and madness. For every great achievement, hundreds of failures. For every demigod slain, thousands of Tarnished who died in the attempt. For every great rune claimed, countless warriors who never came close. The price of pursuing godhood is so steep that we should perhaps not judge those who refuse to pay it. The real madness might be continuing, not surrendering. Yet someone must continue. Someone must refuse to give up, must rise after the 1000th death, must persist when persistence seems insane. Because without that one stubborn soul who will not surrender, the lands between remains locked in its cycle of decay. The Erdtree burns but does not fall. The Elden Ring stays shattered. The demigods continue their pointless war. Marika's will, if Gideon spoke true, is for eternal struggle. But eternity can only be broken by someone willing to defy it. This is why the Tarnished who succeeds is important, and why all those who gave up matter just as much. The victor stands on a mountain of failure, learns from countless corpses, benefits from every piece of equipment looted from those who died before. The success is not individual but collective, built from the accumulated experience of all who tried. In this sense, those who gave up did not fail completely. They contributed data points, eliminated dead ends, marked dangerous paths. Their surrenders made your victory possible. But this does not make their suffering less real or their despair less valid. It does not justify the cruelty of the system that broke them. It simply means that in a world as dark and unforgiving as the lands between, even failure can have meaning if someone comes after who learns from it. The Tarnished who gave up are not footnotes to someone else's glory. They are the foundation upon which any victory must necessarily be built. As you stand before the Elden Ring, as you reach toward godhood, take a moment to remember them. Remember Vyke, who loved too much to burn his maiden. Remember Edgar, whose grief became madness. Remember Roderika, who never saw grace but found purpose anyway. Remember Gideon, who learned truth and was crushed by it. Remember Nephili, who chose justice over ambition. Remember the nameless thousands whose bodies mark the path, whose equipment arms you, whose failures taught you. They are the cost of your ambition. They are what the lands between demanded to produce one Elden Lord. And if their stories teach anything, it is this. The journey to godhood requires you to walk over the broken dreams of those who tried before. And if you succeed, you must carry the weight of their sacrifice. You must be worthy not just of the throne, but of all the suffering that purchased your path to it. The sad Tarnished who give up are not your enemies or your inferiors. They are the vast majority, the normal response to impossible demands. You are the aberration, the exception, the one who refused to be reasonable. Whether that makes you hero or madman remains to be seen. But as you reach for the Elden Ring, remember, you succeed because they failed. And their failure is as much a part of this story as your triumph. Much of Elden Ring's lore is deliberately ambiguous, leaving room for interpretation. While this script is built on in-game evidence item descriptions, NPC dialogue, environmental storytelling, some connections and motivations remain speculative. Where the game provides clear facts, we've presented them as such. Where we've drawn inferences or offered interpretations, such as the exact nature of Shabriri's role in Vyke's fall, or whether Gideon's understanding of Marika's will is accurate, we've indicated this through careful language. The beauty of Elden Ring's storytelling lies in this ambiguity, allowing each player to piece together their own understanding of these tragic tales. If you found this deep dive into the lore of failure and despair illuminating, if you've pondered the cost of ambition in your own playthroughs, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more explorations of the dark corners of Elden Ring's narrative. The lands between hold countless stories, and we've only begun to uncover them. Until next time, may you find grace in the darkness. Or at least find the strength to continue when grace itself seems to have abandoned you.